The Great Smoky Mountains are older than the Atlantic Ocean, older than the Appalachian Trail, older than the country built around them. Before there were park rangers, before there were maps, there were stories. Not internet stories, not horror fiction, stories carried by Cherokee families, by early settlers, by people who lived where the fog never fully lifts. Tonight we're not exploring abandoned structures, we're exploring the 6 legends that never left. Legends that locals still speak about carefully. Because in the Smoky Mountains, some things are said to walk after dark. Lock your doors, put your headphones on, pull your blanket tight, because the mountains don't just hold history, they remember it. Spearfinger, the stone woman of the Smokies. Long before the Smoky Mountains became a national park, long before settlers built cabins in Cades Cove, the Cherokee people told stories about something that moved through these hills. They called her Utlunta, but English speakers gave her another name, Spearfinger. According to Cherokee oral tradition, Spearfinger was not a ghost, not a spirit, not a myth told for entertainment. She was described as a being made partly of stone. Her skin was said to resemble rock, hard, gray, cold, and on one hand, where a normal finger should be, she had a long blade-like stone, sharp as flint. Ethnographers such as James Mooneyed documented the legend in the late 19th century while studying Cherokee traditions. Mooneyed recorded that Spearfinger was said to live in caves along the Tennessee-North Carolina border, especially near the Unaka Range and areas that are now part of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Her method was not brute force, it was deception. She was said to approach villages disguised as an elderly woman, bent, slow, soft-spoken. Children were warned never to approach a stranger in the woods because Spearfinger could imitate voices. She could call out like a grandmother or like a relative. Once close enough, the stories say she would use the stone blade to cut into her victims. Not randomly, specifically, she was said to eat the liver. The Cherokee believed the liver was the seat of life and vitality. In several documented variations of the legend, villagers would find bodies intact, except for that. No signs of animal attack, no obvious struggle described in the story, just absence. The detail is what makes it unsettling, because the legend was used as both warning and memory. Some historians believe Spearfinger may reflect real dangers that existed in the mountains, unknown predators, hostile individuals, or even ancient intertribal violence encoded into myth. But here is what makes the story endure. The geography. There are rock formations in western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, known locally as Spearfinger Rock. The name remains, not as a theme park attraction, but as a quiet geographic marker. Even today, older Appalachian families who grew up near Cherokee lands will tell you that children were warned not to wander near certain caves at dusk. Not because of bears, not because of cliffs, but because something in the mountains could pretend to be human. The most disturbing part of the legend is not the stone finger. It is the voice. The idea that something could call you by name, and you would step toward it willingly. There are no police reports tied to Spearfinger, no modern sightings verified, but the legend was recorded long before horror fiction shaped American storytelling. It existed independently, passed through generations, and preserved in documented Cherokee ethnography, in a region where fog settles thick and sound travels strangely between ridges. A story about something that mimics voices does not feel accidental. The Smoky Mountains are full of caves, full of echoes, full of blind turns in narrow hollows, and some stories survive because they describe fear people once knew intimately. The Cherokee eventually told of her defeat, tricked into exposing her heart, turned fully to stone, but the warning remained. If you hear your name in the woods, make sure you know who is calling. And that was only one story carried through these mountains. The next legend does not describe a creature. It describes a people, one said to have lived here before the Cherokee and vanished without a trace. The Mooneyed people, the vanished before the Cherokee. When early European explorers entered the Appalachian region in the 16th century, they documented something unusual in their journals, not about wildlife, not about geography, about people. According to Cherokee oral tradition, when their ancestors settled parts of the southern Appalachians, they encountered a different group already living there. They were described as pale, small in number, light sensitive, unable to see well in daylight. The Cherokee called them Mooneyed. The story was later recorded in the 18th and 19th centuries by historians and ethnographers, collecting regional accounts. One of the most cited references comes from Benjamin Smith Barton in the late 1700s, who wrote that Cherokee traditions spoke of a people who could not see in the daytime. The description is strange, not supernatural, not monstrous, just biologically different. Some versions say the Mooneyed people lived in stone structures. Others say they retreated into caves. Several Appalachian towns later adopted the legend into local identity. In Fort Mountain, Georgia, there is an ancient stone wall whose origin remains debated. Some local folklore connects it to the Mooneyed people. Archaeologists attribute the wall to indigenous construction, possibly ancestral Cherokee or earlier Mississippian cultures, but the legend persists because the timeline feels incomplete. Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto traveled through parts of the southeast in the 1600s. While his records do not explicitly confirm Mooneyed tribes, some regional historians have speculated that stories of pale inhabitants could reflect encounters with displaced groups. Others suggest albinism or genetic light sensitivity within isolated populations. There is no skeletal evidence confirming a distinct lost race in the Smokies, no excavation proving a separate civilization. But what unsettles researchers is the consistency of the oral account. The idea that when the Cherokee arrived in parts of the mountains, they did not find empty land. They found someone already there, and those people vanished, not assimilated clearly into tribal history, not documented extensively by colonists, simply described as retreating. Some stories say they fled west, others say they were driven out. A few darker versions imply they were wiped out, and then the record goes quiet. In Appalachian storytelling, the Mooneyed people are not described as violent, not predatory, not supernatural, just different and gone, which raises uncomfortable historical questions. Were they a remnant of an earlier migration, a misunderstood group, a memory of a conflict lost to time, or a legend shaped by centuries of retelling? The Smoky Mountains are among the oldest mountain ranges in the world, older than many recorded civilizations. Human presence in Appalachia stretches back thousands of years. Entire cultures rose and fell before written documentation reached the region. The Mooneyed story may be folklore, or it may be a fragment, a distorted memory of a people erased long before colonial records began. What makes it disturbing is not what they were. It is that something, or someone, was there before, and whatever happened to them left no clear archaeological signature. Only a name, Mooneyed. In a place where fog lingers in the valleys long after sunrise, a legend about people who could not see in daylight feels almost metaphorical, almost symbolic. But symbols usually begin somewhere real, and the mountains rarely give up what they bury. Spearfinger warned of deception. The Mooneyed legend warns of forgotten history. The next story shifts again, not to ancient tribes, but to something that moves like an animal and is said to hunt like one. The Wampus cat, the cursed watcher in the trees. In the southern Appalachians, there is a creature people rarely joke about, because unlike older myths told with distance, the Wampus cat feels closer. The legend exists in multiple variations across Tennessee, North Carolina, and Georgia. Some versions trace back to Cherokee oral tradition. Others evolved later among Appalachian settlers, but almost every version shares one thing: transformation. In Cherokee stories recorded in the 19th century, a woman once defied sacred boundaries. In one variation, she disguised herself in animal skin to spy on a male war council. In another, she violated ritual law. As punishment, she was transformed, not into a wolf, not into a bear, but into something between human and wildcat, condemned to roam the mountains, neither fully animal nor fully human. Settler folklore later shaped the image further, describing the Wampus cat as a large feline creature, sometimes with 6 legs, sometimes walking upright briefly, sometimes with glowing eyes. The name itself likely comes from Gullah Geechee, or Appalachian dialect influence layered over older indigenous stories, but the fear element remained consistent. The Wampus cat was not random. It stalked, it watched. It followed from tree lines. Unlike bear sightings, unlike cougar reports, the Wampus cat in folklore does not charge openly, it circles. Families in rural mountain communities use the legend as warning. Do not wander too far at dusk. Do not ignore the feeling of being watched. Some 19th century newspapers in the southeast referenced Wampus sightings, often loosely describing unknown animal encounters. The term became shorthand for something strange in the woods. Wildlife experts attribute many modern interpretations to misidentified mountain lions. Though confirmed cougar populations were rare in parts of Appalachia during certain decades, black bears also roam the Smokies. And at night in silhouette, size perception changes. But folklore does not survive purely on animal misidentification. It survives on emotion. In some Appalachian counties, older residents have described hearing low screams at night. Not howls, not owl calls, something in between. Biologists can explain fox screams, bobcat calls, the way sound distorts through ridges. But in isolated hollows, explanation does not always quiet the imagination. The most disturbing element of the Wampus legend is not physical attack. It is the curse. The idea that the creature was once human, condemned to roam the tree line, watching the lives she can no longer live. There are no confirmed police files documenting Wampus attacks, no official wildlife classification, but the name appears in regional archives, in early 20th century print, in oral histories recorded by Appalachian folklorists. And when you hike deep enough into the Smokies at night, there are stretches where the forest grows silent in layers. In those moments, every snapped twig feels intentional. Every rustle feels paced. Whether the Wampus cat was born from indigenous myth, settler imagination, or misunderstood wildlife, it remains one of the few legends that blends punishment, transformation, and predatory presence into one figure. Spearfinger hunted, the Mooneyed people vanished, the Wampus cat watches, and the next legend does not stalk. It hides and is rarely seen at all, but when it is, people describe it as small, fast, and not entirely solid. The Bujam of Cataloochee, the thing you don't quite see. Cataloochee Valley sits deep inside what is now Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Before it became protected land, it was a remote Appalachian settlement. Families farmed there for generations. Isolation was normal, silence was common, and strange things were often explained quietly. In late 19th and early 20th century Appalachian storytelling, settlers in parts of western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee occasionally referenced something called a Bujam. The term likely evolved from older British nonsense literature, particularly Lewis Carroll. But in Appalachia, the word shifted. It stopped meaning imaginary. It became regional slang for something unseen but felt. In Cataloochee, accounts passed through families. The Bujam was never described clearly. That was the point. It was something small, quick, just at the edge of vision. People described movement where nothing should be. Not animals, not wind. Movement. Farmers told stories of tools being moved slightly. Doors found ajar. Footsteps heard in dry leaves when no one was there. Children claimed to see something dark behind fence posts. Older residents did not laugh. They told them not to talk about it at night. The Bujam was said to avoid direct confrontation. It did not chase, it did not roar. It existed in peripheral awareness. In some versions, it followed travelers walking home after dark, not attacking, just pacing parallel in the tree line. The unsettling part of the Bujam stories is their subtlety. Unlike Spearfinger or the Wampus cat, there are no dramatic attacks in the legend, just presence, just wrongness. Cataloochee was eventually emptied when the national park was formed in the 1930s. Families were relocated, cabins abandoned, graveyards left behind, and in interviews conducted decades later with former residents, a few referenced odd experiences in the valley. Nothing concrete, just that something always felt off near the tree lines. Psychologists would say isolation creates heightened sensitivity, peripheral illusions, pattern recognition errors. Appalachian valleys amplify sound and distort movement in fog. Scientific explanations exist, but folklore grows not from one sighting. It grows from repetition, from shared unease. The Bujam may have been a cultural placeholder, a name given to the feeling of being watched in a landscape too quiet. Or it may have been something older, something undefined, unlike a predator, unlike a ghost, something that never fully enters view. In the Smokies, fog settles thick in low valleys. Shadows shift with moving clouds. Your eyes adjust slowly between tree trunks, and sometimes your mind completes shapes that are not fully there. The Bujam legend does not warn you of claws. It warns you of perception. of how easily the forest can play with it. Spearfinger deceived with a voice. The Mooneyed people vanished from history. The Wampus cat stalked the tree line. The Bujam lingers just beyond clarity, and the final legend is tied not to creatures or curses, but to treasure, and to those who went looking for it, and never came back the same. The Lost Silver Mine Curse, the mountain that keeps what it hides. Long before the Smoky Mountains became protected land, they were a place people searched, not for peace, for wealth. In the 18th and 19th centuries, settlers pushed into Appalachian territory, chasing rumors of hidden silver and gold. One of the most persistent stories in western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee is the legend of a lost silver mine hidden deep in the mountains. Versions of the story vary. Some trace it back to early Spanish exploration, others to Civil War-era prospectors. Some link it to a German immigrant named Felix Walker. Others to anonymous trappers who supposedly found a vein of silver so rich they swore to secrecy. What makes the story endure is not treasure, it is disappearance. Throughout the 19th century, local newspapers occasionally referenced prospectors going missing in remote mountain areas, not large numbers. Not mass vanishings, but individuals who entered deep hollows alone and were never found. Appalachian terrain is unforgiving. Steep ridges, sudden storms, unmarked sinkholes, dense fog that can erase visibility in minutes. Exposure explains many disappearances, but folklore adds something else, the curse. According to regional storytelling, those who searched obsessively for the silver were warned, not by officials, by locals. Older mountain families would reportedly tell newcomers that the mountain keeps what it doesn't give. In some versions, prospectors returned, but changed, refusing to speak about what they saw, abandoning their search, selling equipment, leaving town quietly. Historical mining attempts in parts of the Smokies are documented. Small-scale operations, limited yields, most failed. Geologists confirm that while small deposits of precious metals exist in Appalachia, no confirmed massive silver vein was ever recorded in the Smoky region, which only fuels the mystery. If there was nothing there, why did so many keep searching? Why do old maps occasionally surface with X marks in remote ravines? Why did some miners claim to have found ore samples that later tested inconclusive? One documented reality remains clear. People disappeared in these mountains. Hunters, prospectors, travelers, most likely victims of terrain and weather, but folklore shaped those tragedies into warning. The lost silver mine became less about treasure and more about obsession. The deeper you go into certain valleys, the quieter it becomes. No road noise, no distant highway hum, just wind pushing through rhododendron thickets. If a person were to fall, if they were to step off trail into dense undergrowth, recovery could take days or never happen. The curse may not be supernatural, it may be psychological. The belief that something is hidden here, something valuable, something worth risking isolation for, and isolation in the Smokies has always carried a cost. Spearfinger warned of deception, the Mooneyed people warned of forgotten history, the Wampus cat warned of transformation, the Bujam warned of perception, the lost silver mine warns of desire. The Smoky Mountains do not need monsters to be dangerous. They are old, complex and vast, and sometimes what haunts a place is not a creature, but the stories of those who went too far into it. The Little Green Men of Kelly Ridge, the Appalachian variation. Most people who know the phrase Little Green Men think of the 1955 Hopkinsville case in Kentucky, but what few realize is that variations of similar sightings were reported across parts of rural Appalachia in the late 1950s and early 1960s, including areas near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. Local newspapers in the region occasionally published short, almost dismissive reports about small glowing figures seen along ridgelines. Not national headlines, small columns, buried in back pages. In one lesser-known account from western North Carolina, residents near a ridge locally referred to as Kelly Ridge reported seeing small luminous shapes moving in formation along a wooded slope late at night. Witnesses described them as small, humanoid in outline, glowing faintly, not carrying lanterns, not casting beam light, but glowing from within. Unlike the Hopkinsville incident, there were no gun battles reported in this regional variation, no direct confrontation. Instead, the figures were described as watching from a distance, appearing between trees, then disappearing abruptly. One local account mentions a farmer claiming his livestock became agitated the night the lights appeared. Another mentions a family reporting that dogs refused to leave the porch. These reports were never formally investigated by federal agencies. Local sheriffs reportedly responded, found nothing. No footprints documented, no physical debris recovered, nothing there. But what makes the Kelly Ridge variation interesting is the pattern overlap. Small luminous figures, silent movement, brief appearance, retreat into wooded terrain. And the geography matters. The Smokies are filled with narrow ridgelines where fog gathers unevenly. In certain conditions, bioluminescent insects, reflected moonlight, and depth perception distortions can create illusions. Psychologists and environmental scientists would suggest optical misinterpretation, light refracting through mist, human pattern recognition, completing shapes in darkness. But folklore did not interpret it as insects. It interpreted it as watchers, small figures observing from tree-line height, never charging, never attacking, just present. In Appalachian oral storytelling, the phrase "little green men" became shorthand for something seen but not understood. Not necessarily extraterrestrial, not necessarily physical beings, but small presences that appear where forest meets clearing. The reason this variation rarely surfaces outside the region is because it never escalated. No violence, no national press, just repeated local unease. And that is often how folklore survives longest, not through spectacle, through quiet repetition. The Smoky Mountains are layered with stories, some indigenous, some settler-born, some 20th century, some shaped by fear of wilderness, some shaped by memory. Spearfinger hunted, the Mooneyed people vanished, the Wampus cat stalked, the Bujam lingered unseen, the lost silver mine tempted the desperate, and on certain ridges, small lights were said to watch from the trees. Not every legend needs a body, not every sighting needs proof. Some survive simply because enough people felt something, and in a mountain range older than the nation built around it, that may be enough. 6 legends, some indigenous, some colonial, some modern, none created for the internet, all rooted in the Smoky Mountains. Spearfinger warned of deception. The Mooneyed people warned of forgotten history. The Wampus cat warned of transformation. The Bujam warned of perception. The lost silver mine warned of obsession. And the lights on Kelly Ridge warned of something watching quietly from the trees. Maybe every legend has a natural explanation. Isolation, wildlife, weather, memory reshaped over time. But the Smoky Mountains were ancient long before we arrived, and stories do not survive for centuries without reason. Which one unsettled you the most? Coincidence, folklore, or something older than both? Lock your doors, put your headphones on, pull your blanket tight, because in the Smokies some stories never leave.